Okay, now we go into part two, and it wasn't supposed to be a part two, for it actually ate everything past a certain point, but I at least saved the first 8 minutes or so. So now what we have is here in Denmark, they're finding in a burial in a tree, uh, sarcophagus, basically a rotten away body, but it had a blue faience bead that matches up 3,400 years ago to the exact chemical signatures found in Egyptian workshops. I could see this through plasma spectrometry. And they have had 23 beads that match up to Amarna, Egypt, and Nippur, and in Mesopotamia here. And so now we're going to go on to more information. And here we can see this other guy that talks about an interactive dig and what they figured out. And I'm just going to summarize this somewhat, but you can see all of these artifacts here and these drilled out and small and beads and sections. There's shell looking pieces, pieces that look like flies and everything. And this is beads from Tomb 11 in the Elite Cemetery HK6. So this is Dynasty 0, we call it, and this is one of the tombs that we were talking about here 3 months ago and in my Origins of Egypt series that I had done. And it's a tomb of an adolescent boy, has the highest number of more diverse collection of beads found to date to Hyrcanopolis. People thought that because of this he had to have some type of destined to royalty or something go on. The materials include turquoise, carnelian, gold, faience, clay, and lapis lazuli, and some carved in the shape of flies and seashells, and that lapis lazuli comes from Sumerian area. And they also have this other pre-dynastic burial, HK43, which is known as Burial 165, which had very few beads were found, and it was found in the worker cemetery in general, but only two graves were beads found. Both of those were children, and beads from around the neck of the child in Burial 165 were the finest and the hardest. The sequence replicates the ancient pattern, although the original string had long ago disintegrated. And so this is the pattern that they had on it, and they would mix the colors into each other and go from each one. Well, what they also found was this, which these are micro drills. And so these guys sitting out in the sun all day holding on to this drill and carve off into it. And while they know that, they did it for later for wood and things, and then of course they must have done it for the beads, this is something that shows very much earlier, and they don't try to tout it as doing such. By the way, that thing right there is a 2 foot long, I'm sorry, 2.5 foot long, gigantic sized flint knife that was found. Yeah, it's way back when. And it doesn't get shown too. And all these caves that were up in here, tombs, and but that's of the New Kingdom, okay? And so this guy tried to recreate this, and first he did them out of eggshells, and he would score it and break them off, and then do them out of eggshells, and keep them inside of a rock that they did, and that's the way that they show them inside the tombs. And it didn't really seem to do much work for it, but in trying to do the red and carnelian ones, it's the same hardness basically as the flint is. And while you have these multicolored pieces that they use, and they know that they did, and he chipped them up and got them ready to go, and here they are. And then he polished each side of them flat, and then he puts them in his feet and tries to do things with them. He himself says, I couldn't even cut into them. So these people must have had something other than flint they were doing this out of, or they were making the core flints that have the sharp point somehow out of something much more harder. Maybe even not a metal, but it would have to have been like, now we're getting up into edging on diamond here at the hardness scale that we're looking at. And it dulled the hell out of his thing here. You can probably see that it's just worn the tip off of it. But yet, they have all of these beads that are done, Tune 26, blah, 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 blah. And he talks about it, and it's neat correlations. and stuff that they've found, and it's pretty neat. I won't go all deep into it and stuff, but basically they used this type of drill here and hand drill it and put the stones in there and do it like that. Now there's other things that are odd that show up in the very first of dynasties, and this has always been an ooh part, but it's not mentioned also. But if you watch my videos, you've probably seen it. Man, I've got a lot of stuff pulled up, guys, to do vids on. I didn't think it was this far down. Where is it? Oh, well, I'm getting close. So one thing that they have in the earliest of dynasties is these crystal blue eyes. And they even use some of them on special scribes, which of course are supposed to be like princes that don't become the next king. And there's a whole group of them here, and there's about 16 of them in all that have it. But even of the first and earliest dynasties, from the first to the 12th, and this is Horaha himself, who's supposed to be the second pharaoh of all time. And due to his name, even though he's found in I believe it's 12th dynasty burial, and even Nefertiti that we know so well with a blonde eye, with the blue eye still left. The other one's gone, but they show that. And even when they did the recreation, everybody freaked out, but they even did her with a brownish green eye, and they said they did her darker shades than what her skin really is, and people still lost it. There's King Tut's representation. There's a whole lot of these that are around too. There's one that actually really looks very much like my dad, and you can see it has partial hair onto it. And so these are like their Ka statues, and they even had it in Nakata, pre-dynastic pharaohs, which is like a bead with a hole slit cut into it, made out of lapis lazuli, which comes from Afghanistan and Sumeria, and in this blue-eyed form. But these crystal eyes, they follow you around the room and they talk about it, and so you can see these guys. They're famous, you know, as far as scribes go and things. And there's even the wife of Nofret. That's the wife of Renifer, and she's got crystal blue eyes. He also does too. It seems like in the earliest dynasties they did, and so did the Sumerians, but they didn't use this crystal eye form. They just put blue eyes in, and they can see it in Buddha and so on. And even the first dynasty king of Egypt, they have a statue at the Louvre, which is really a Sumerian statue, priest king, and they say it's the Narmer statue, that it's got symbols that go with it and everything, and it's more verified than the other Narmer statue they had. They said they got that from a Cairo, from some tomb robber trying to sell it in a market in Cairo, and they knew it was something. So the story became he must have been the first one and all of this type of stuff. But that's a lot of conjecture. People have said that it may have been Khufu, that could have been a lot of people. But so let's look at one more thing on beads. Actually, two. So we're all familiar with the tale of Pompeii and how it got swamped under on like 79 BC, and that they've all dug it all out now. And while there was a time you could only see part of it, now you can see almost all of it, and they're still finding more and more stuff, just other than the dead bodies that are trapped in that strange positions where they died in their cavities and so on. They're taking people and doing genetics on them and seeing what connects. And inside this one house where 10 ladies were found, and so they describe this as a sorcerer's treasure trove or a witch's thing or whatever, but it doesn't necessarily seem like that. For people who used to use all kinds of glyphs back then and so on. But there's that bird icon that we were looking at, and you can see these Feiance beads that are all through here and drilled out that look very much like them in some other shapes. And very interesting, this piece here and here that we'll get to shortly. And turquoise pieces, huge turquoise pieces down here. Well, huge for turquoise, basically bigger chunks that you find. And these glass beads right here are real important. They're this see-through glass beads, but they have inclusions into them, and it makes them look somewhat dirty, but it also is see-through still, and it's kind of neat. Now this, which we'll get a close-up look at here in just a second, is actually a satyr. And if we were to look at the whole collection here and all the earrings and all the things, these women had a collection going on, and there are all kinds of phallic symbols like this one and so on, but people have said it might be a witch's workshop or things like that, but it doesn't seem that they had the equipment there, that they just had a bunch of stuff, and these are a bunch of women of nobles and stuff that were probably together when it happened and may have huddled together, and whenever it happened they were together in the house. But it was found in a big grouping that looked like it had been in a box, and the only thing left were the hinges. So she had quite what you would call the jewelry collection back then. Here is a close-up of that cut into the back glass satyr that's in there, etched glass in it. And here's another look at those see-through glass beads that have colors. Here's some grapes and things like that all are ornaments that go on to dangling earrings and so on. Here's that eagle staring right at you, basically, and some of the bronze medallion type things in there. Beautifully carved effigies symbolizing wheat and things along like that. If you look, here's one of the ancient gods. And so there's a lot of weird, intricate pieces also that seem to be in the mix, I guess, if you will. And if you remember, we did a video, was it last year, at the first of last year, where somebody had found this etching, and basically this etching says a date that's a couple of months later than what was recorded by the Greeks as have it happening. And it's almost impossible to have that date. You either have to have the belief that they wrote the date at the wrong time on purpose for some reason, or that they were marking whenever it had happened, and probably weren't one of the people that didn't get out of there. And so big time volcano. But these pieces, and especially some of these giant turquoise pieces and the pieces that look like philosophers that might have even been gods, but I don't think they've tried to identify them there. But and the selection here shows you there's quite a collection. But let's look at something else, and this is what we get the connective from in a strange way. And I got to go back through all of these. Oh my gosh, God, I've got so much stuff pulled up. I've got to finish off these videos, but I got 40 hours built up. So I'm not going to show you all of this, but there's this. Let me see if I can. Kasayan Hunters site, okay? And got some interesting videos, some decent amount of subscribers, could stand some more. Y'all go check it out. What we're going to see here is beads in the Philippines, right? And they're showing all these special beads, and here's a mix of some of them, and some of them even look like dates and so on like that. It has this blue-eyed effect in some of them and strange things, but also this black, and I don't know if you can quite make it out there, but there is that stork or an ibis type that's there, and all these glass beads. And they kind of got known for their glass beads, but they said glass beads were brought to them during a time of great hardship, that these people had showed up. And they're very intricate. Now she tells a story that they talk about how they came looking for gold, and they traded beads with these people. And the Spaniards showed up. They said the natives didn't possess much gold, and it's believed they had mines in the mountains, but they did not want to show them, the Spaniards, for feeling that they would appropriate these. And then they also had beads that they had that were from their ancestors, that were from the gods, basically. And they didn't want to get rid of them in any way. They were sacred to them, and it was not something that was, that you could have. And what's strange is it shows these made out of glassish type rock or an agate, right? Or something like a geode. And in that, there's been an extra application done of other crystals of some stone in designs on it, and it looks like it had been heated up to the point that it all became viscous again in some way and became solid. Some of these have this scaling and this patterning on them and stuff. This almost looks like Orion, if you will, in these sacred stone things. Well, what she figured out after seeing all these patterns, which strangely enough, there's that Maui fishhook, and they call it Rui boomerang, but there are these eye patterns, and if you look at it closely, it's more of a person standing up with his arms, and they have elbows and curves and bends, and that matches some ancient Phoenician stuff. And lotus beads that are here, that most of these are seen as stonework. She says they're like stonework, and this is a 8-spoked wheel with a dot in the center, the 9-eye they call it, and that's really that 8-spoked eye, like a sun symbology, and whiteness going all in between, and it requires incredible beadwork. And a lot of them have this stone that it really looks impregnated in. Now you look at something like this, and when we saw those other ones, this looks fake. Well, they have said this is what it is, and it's crystallized on it, but it has been applied to it in some type of paste form, and then like we do glazing nowadays, that it had been done like that. And I don't know if you've ever played with it and had the stuff that has little crystals in it and then blurbs out at different colors and stuff, but it's quite amazing. And this looks like one that didn't fire too good, and there's other applications that make this crackling, scaling skin that's around it. 7-eye dragon scale, and they have names for certain ones of these, and this triangular pattern, which is very much similar to a swastika, but a 3-point form, but also kind of a shamrock look in many cases. Also, there's a connection to the ancient fishhook of these Phoenicians, and that's where she makes the connection of this beadwork that matches up with Phoenicians, and even having the bands, the idea of an eyes, swirls and circles that may be found on all types of islands and stuff. Now she says the deceased carry a set of bandines and bulganis, and these are different types, right? Well, what that is, I'm not going to show you this whole thing, I'd just be ripping off her video. But there are ones that are this banded agate and stuff in different two-tone colors and stuff, and that's that one kind. And then the other ones are real sacred, and they have these boomerang effects and ones with this crackle skin. And whenever I first saw this, it's a strange thing. My dad went to Taiwan and things, and he went to the Philippines. And when he did, the big thing for servicemen to do was get them to make, out of beer bottles, green or brown beer bottles, they would blow up a set of fish or all these different designs they had, and they would make giant holding plates and have a whole set of fruit that they all made out of beer bottle glass right there in front of you. And the fish that we got, which I still have it on my shelf, by the way, looks like a goldfish. And the way they got the skin to look like that is they heated it up just right, and they rubbed over it with a wet sponge, and it cracked. And then they put the fins on it so it didn't have cracks on that, out of fresh glass, and pulled them, and you almost tell how they were pulled and then allowed to cool and stuff. It's just real neat. But then you see this effect in a lot of them. And oh yeah, yeah, there's one. There's a boomerang clear agate swastika. And these are part of the sacred collections that they have. Here's a one-eyed daisy, which sounds like the sun symbol. Now she starts to put ideas together, and I really want you to just go check her site out and give her a click on it and everything, because I don't want to take all of it off of it, but she's telling you that this is ancient Proto-Canaanite Phoenician writing that are on them, and certain symbols that they've linked to places really are the Lamed in an early version, and the staff of God or control, the staff of power, and the shepherd's hook, and that's that ink. That's, oh wow, that's Maui. That goes with Maui, and they have water and the mem that zigzags around, and names for the local ones and stuff. And it's not all they have ones with Tet and this same type of idea that goes with the swastika, and this clover pattern, and even lightning bolt. And it says it goes along with Nun and the lightning bolt, which is then there's Z, which is also lightning bolt of the Greeks, which comes out to Zeus, Z, and it goes with that. But this strange pattern here is like an N, but not quite kicked on its side. And this is Nun, and we talked about the Shu Nun of the Proto-Europeans, and how people have made that connection to the people who came in to ancient Egypt in pre-dynastic time. And there's ones that have strange crosses, hooks, again that wheel that goes on to it. And oh, did I mention this is in the Philippines? And there's mentions of the land of Ophir, and she tries to make connections of that, and the gods of Ophir, and goat eye DZ. Isn't that weird? It's a geode type, worn through, like my dad used to have in that he had got from overseas, and it was a geode that he got, which was round and then sliced in half, and he had made my mom some earrings and things out of it. Here, another symbol too, which looks all too familiar. And did I mention that this is in the Philippines? Yep. And they've got all kinds of ones. And she mentions at the end of it that Marcus Garvey, whenever he had gotten going good, had started making statements to help other black people, and he said people without knowledge of their past history, origin, and culture is like a tree without roots. Well, we do find them today, actually, though, claiming they were Egyptians and anything but the West African primitives that they came from. And I guess Garvey helped that out too, because one of his other famous statements was, pick a lie and keep telling it until you believe it. But that's probably another story altogether. But these wicked looking beads that they had, and they tried to keep them for sacred for oh so long, and you can see these looks that they have in them in the celestial wheel situation of Canaanite deities from back in the day, and a bull god thing, and we talked about how bulls go with sun worship and so on, and the cross and things that go with a whole lot of this in a strange way. And she, not I, have made the connection to these strange beads that they kept from their ancestors that had come from the gods. So there's our vid, and I mean, she uses those symbols where she's got proto-Canaanite symbols, and they find them scratched all over thing in oracle scripts, and pieces of pictures, and they all seem to be on there. And strangely, you know, there's even crackles that have that double color. But there's this also book that she talks about called the Boxer Codex, and how they talk about the people that had these beads and special things about them, and she tells you a couple of clues about it. So anyhow, guys, like, share, and subscribe, and enjoy. But I was trying and waiting for something to connect these three things together so I could talk a little bit about what she had. And I don't want to do a straight rip-off video, and I didn't want to click through just a couple of her pictures, but she's made this connection. She's the one that I showed some of the information on armor and ancient weapons found in the Philippines. They connect back to the ancient Greeks, right? And I had this video from ever since then, or well, ready to go ever since then, and just didn't have the other connections. And after finding that new article on the beads and going, okay, well, here's this one, and then let's look at that bead workshop that they found back in the day in those flint things. But it also shows the anomaly. They are making flint things out of stuff that's too hard to cut with their flint workshop. So where does that come from? And those crystal eyes that are just right after that, out of nowhere, bam. Peace.